broadcasting live from an undisclosed location. This is the TCMMA podcast with your host, Chris Cross.
Whoa!
Dana White privilege.
Let's go, baby! Let's go! Let's go! Let's go! Let's go, baby!
Dana White privilege. Privilege.
What's happening? This is your boy Chris Cross checking in. This is a TCMMA podcast bringing you all the most updated MMA news, especially UFC news. Check us out at Facebook or Instagram.com/Chris Cross MMA or TCMMA podcast. Also, find our podcast wherever you get yours. We're all over. Apple, Spotify, everywhere. Google. TCMMA podcast. So welcome. So a lot of news breaking today in the UFC. It's an off week for the UFC. UFC 302, Islam Makhachev versus Dustin Poirier is about 11 days away. So we get a little break here to get back into some of the main topics that are circulating in the world of the UFC. So let's highlight those and then come back to them. Number one, UFC plans to be flexible in next broadcast rights deal, including potential end to traditional pay-per-view, which would be great. I wouldn't mind paying a little extra every month to get more sports and to not have to do the pay-per-view, right? Even though most people aren't, well, not most, but a lot of people aren't paying for the pay-per-view, let's be honest. So that would be a great package. Now, will the UFC go away from ESPN? That's the big question. Also, UFC weight class power rankings. According to ESPN, a new division claims number one. Also, Dustin Poirier's title bout at UFC 302 could be his last fight. This is my shot. I won't get another, says Poirier. And that's true. This is the one he's got to have. Conor McGregor currently in negotiation stage with UFC on new contract. Still wants 3 fights in 2024. Never going to happen, but we'll explain. Also, MVP. Michael Venom Page accepts Ian Gary's UFC 303 challenge, saying I can do it next week. And with Khalil Roundtree out of the co-main event, all of a sudden the door is now open and the UFC needs Ian Gary on that card under McGregor right where he wants to be. That will be a great fight, I mean, to say the least. Also, UFC Saudi Arabia adds several bouts for Robert Whittaker versus Khamzat Chimaev card, and to be completely honest, I don't really care. I'll see anybody fight as long as the card ends with Khamzat Chimaev at the top of the ticket. But there are some intriguing fights along the way. We're going to get into all those. So that's what's going down today in the UFC. And to me, number one, we got to begin with the new rights deal. It ends in 2025 with ESPN. So we still have a lot of time left, over a year and a half. But here toward the end of the year, beginning of the new year, the UFC has the opportunity to negotiate with ESPN strictly. And ESPN is getting ready to roll out their standalone streaming service, which would be like, instead of watching ESPN on cable TV, which is sinking very fast, people are cutting the cord like crazy, right? We've seen other places like Amazon and Peacock and others get some sports rights deals, but ESPN is going big, right? They're going to charge like $29 to $39 for the standalone service, but you get everything, right? You're going to get NBA games, NFL games, probably some college football in there, I would assume. And the UFC needs ESPN because, especially if there's no pay-per-view, and you just want to build your subscriber base, the UFC, hands down, which would give you exclusive access to the UFC, which is what ESPN's going to want. All those people that help build ESPN Plus will help build ESPN as a standalone app because of the UFC. These are diehard fans like myself that are going to go to the next streaming service that has the UFC, and it would be great if ESPN paid enough to where there's no more pay-per-view, because now I can get my UFC every Saturday night, which I love, but I can also get NFL games, NBA games. That will be the premier app for sports right now. And I just cannot see the UFC going away from ESPN. But during this exclusive time when they can negotiate with ESPN, I don't think a deal is going to get done. They're going to start fielding offers, unless it's just so good they can't say no. They're going to start fielding offers from Amazon, from Peacock, from Netflix, right, to force the price up. But eventually, in my opinion, they will stay with ESPN. There's just too much money to be lost here for ESPN, and it's a guaranteed subscriber base because a lot of UFC fans are also NFL fans, are also NBA fans, right? And the UFC is the one that kind of brings all that together because you're getting exclusive access. So you're guaranteed to get UFC fans on board and will pay for that package. It will be worth it not to have to, try to go underground, if you will, on the internet to find the UFC every week. It'd just be easier to pay the $29, $39 and because you're going to be watching NFL and NBA anyway. So I just think that's what's going to happen, but it's not going to be early in 2025. We're going to get to June or July before a deal's done because the time is on the UFC side. According to ESPN, there's a new number one division, and that division is the lightweight division. I would argue that it's always been number one. I get you got bantamweight and featherweight. Those divisions are on the rise. Welterweight has sunk to fourth. You got the women's flyweight division has surpassed the women's strawweight division. It's number 5 overall. So you got all these things happening. I think the light heavyweight division is starting to come around. But now that you lost Pereira in there, and you don't have Khamzat in there, it's weakening a bit, but it will be back. It will be back. The lightweight division is tough too. So that's kind of how the rankings go. But yeah, lightweight is hands down the number one division in the UFC. I don't even understand how it could not be. Anybody can win on any given day, more so than any other division. Dustin Poirier's title bout at UFC 302 could be his last. We've been hearing this like the last 3 or 4 fights. Poirier saying in so many words, this is my opportunity. I won't get another one. So Poirier's obviously got to go for the win here. Makhachev's going to be a tough out. And, I'm assuming a lot of people want to see Islam Makhachev versus Sarukian. That's a fight that a lot of people want to see. And for that to happen, Islam's got to get the win here. If Poirier gets the win here, will he even defend the belt? Will he retire? I think if he wins it, he'll defend it. Because now you're getting even more money than you were before. So I look for Poirier. If he loses this fight, he's probably going to be feeling really down, and it could be over. So a lot of people will probably be pulling for the Diamond to win this fight. I won't be one of them because I got Islam Makhachev winning, and he's on the due list. We got to keep him as the favorite no matter what until he goes down. As we march forward, Conor McGregor, currently in negotiation stage with UFC on new contract, still wants 3 fights in 2024, and I don't see it happening. You remember when he beat Donald Cowboy Cerrone in 40 seconds. He wanted to fight immediately. The UFC made him wait. Then the pandemic rolls around, and you're not going to have Conor fight. You're definitely not going to have McGregor fight in front of no fans. So it ended up being almost a year before he fought Dustin Poirier, and that was a terrible thing. So I don't see that happening. The UFC likes to wait for the perfect opportunity. But you never know. If McGregor can get the win here, a December date could be a perfect opportunity. So maybe he gets 2 in this year, but definitely not 3. Especially if he's not fighting until July. I don't see him fighting back-to-back fights 3 months out. Or really, one will be 2 months, another will be 3. It's just not going to happen. But I like the McGregor's focus like that. And that's what you want to hear from him going into a fight with Michael Chandler. You better be serious stepping in there with Michael Chandler. Speaking of Conor McGregor and UFC 303, MVP now believes he wants to fight Ian Gary, and things are changing rapidly, right? Khalil Rountree's out against Jamal Hill, so the co-main event has been blasted, basically. That's not going to happen. Who knows who could step in for a Jamal Hill fight, but if Ian Gary gets a fight with Michael Venom Page, that will be the co-main event. I'm telling you right now. And the concern for MVP was fighting on short notice. I think that concern's beginning to leave because he understands the opportunity here. And in the UFC, when things like this happen, Colby Covington don't want to fight, other guys don't want to fight, and you got a guy like Ian Gary who's dead set on fighting on the Conor McGregor card for obvious reasons. MVP is going to step up and this fight's going to happen. Make no mistake about it. Now, as we march forward into the month of June, which is just, this is all June, right? Makhachev, Conor McGregor, and Khamzat Chimaev. Well, they've added several bouts to the Whittaker-Chimaev card. We know Pavlovich and Volkov are fighting. D-Rod and Kelvin Gastelum. Johnny Walker, Volkan Oezdemir. Remember, this is happening in Saudi Arabia, so they're putting together a big card, almost like a pay-per-view event. Sherry Magomedov, who is trending, will face a guy named Joelton Luderbach, whom I'd never heard of, and that's probably why Magomedov will win there. Jared Gordon versus Nasrat Haqparast, that's a good one. And probably crowd favorite, Abu Azaitar will take on Dennis Tiuliulin, which that'll be a great fight. And these are just some of the highlights on that card. But again, who cares? Because all we want to see is Khamzat fight against Robert Whittaker. And I don't care how he gets the win. He's just got to get the win. It doesn't matter if it's a boring decision fight. I don't really care. The bottom line is we need Khamzat to go in there and get the job done against a very good fighter in Robert Whittaker. It has to happen. All hands on deck. 5-round battle if necessary. But if I'm Khamzat, I'm going in there and forget all the talk of me not having a gas tank and trying to prove that. Forget all that. That's just for the fans. If I'm Khamzat, I'm going in there and I'm trying to finish Robert Whittaker with overwhelming force as soon as that bell rings. Overwhelming force. Yeah, you risk running out of gas if you don't get the finish. But he's good at going in there in the takedown game and riding you, things of that nature. But when we've seen him get in trouble against Gilbert Burns when he couldn't do that, and against Usman, he gets injured late in the first round. So now you can't ride Usman in the second and third. Maybe instead you go into the Usman fight and just try to KO him, which I can understand why you may not want to go for that, because Usman is a pure striker with a ground game. But Khamzat's ground game is better than anyone on the planet. So at any time, he could pull that out of his bag of tricks if he feels like that's the best route. But in this one, he needs to get back on board with a huge victory and put himself in position to fight for the title to where he cannot be denied. And if you go in there and just finish Robert Whittaker early in the fight, there's going to be a lot of people come back on board and say, hey, you know what? I want to see Khamzat fight for the title. I want to see what he can do. And as Khamzat fans, that's what we need, is we need the crowd support back. As much as we got a bunch of fair weather fans in terms of Khamzat who are mad at him still for missing weight against Nate Diaz, I feel like God intervened on Nate Diaz's behalf on that one. That was a good thing for Nate Diaz. People were still upset. And then he had sluggish performances in the next two fights against Burns. Well, Burns was prior to that, but he sluggish fight against Burns, sluggish fight against Usman in the minds of the people. So he's got to come back here and get a dominant victory. He just has to in order to get the momentum to get a title shot. That's the bottom line. So that's what's going on in the UFC. Would a UFC sign with ESPN? I say yes, but they're going to make ESPN pay handsomely, which ESPN will do because they need those subscribers, right? The UFC is the glue that keeps ESPN together in the next phase of post-cable TV, right? Because the bottom line is UFC is a year-round sport. Yeah, it's great. You get the NFL fans, that's 4 months. You get the NBA fans, that's 6 to 8 months. Great. But UFC is year-round, and all those fans are going to watch NBA, are going to watch NFL. You must have UFC. And at the end of the day, ESPN will beat anyone else's offer to keep the UFC. The UFC knows this, and will use that to their advantage. So we'll have to wait and see. But I'm excited to see how this plays out, and I'm hoping and praying that ESPN keeps UFC, because I like the fact that they keep all the stats, the live stats, this, that, and the other. Before ESPN, those things were hard to find. Now you can go right there and see the live stats, who's leading in strikes, round by round what's going on. And we just need ESPN to keep this deal. I don't think Netflix or Amazon or any of those others will do as good of a job. And will ESPN continue doing that if they lose the deal? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But listen, that's what's going on right now in the world of the MMA. As always, this is your boy Chris Cross. I hope you have a great day, and God bless. Peace.